Meatloaf must be everybody's favorite, but if it's well done, it's superb. If it's badly done, it's yuck. But now let me show you a fantastic technique to get the best meatloaf. And we're going to start with the way that you bake the meatloaf. Instead of baking it in the normal pan or whatever, and then you get a soggy bottom and a dry top, what we're going to do is to bake it on a trivet, but we're going to put a piece of aluminium foil shaped over an oval plate like this to form a sort of a little basin, and then you just firm it down nicely. And in order to stop the bottom of the loaf from getting too dry, too soggy, we poke holes in the foil. Right, now the foil is ready, so let's start making the loaf. Now here we've got some lovely onions that have been sauteed until they are really soft and golden brown. Please remember when you're working with onions, they must be well done. Raw onions in a meatloaf is not a good idea. Now here is the secret magic ingredient. This new beef stock is absolutely outstanding in a meatloaf for the simple reason that the stock has a lot of gelatin in, and the minute you add that natural gelatin to the meatloaf, you keep fantastic moisture in there. So we add 2 of these little stock sachets to the browned onions, and some parsley, which is a natural accompaniment to meatloaf, and we're going to use some garlic and herb seasoning. If you are aware of salt and intake, you can use the low salt variety. Just mix this up, and we're going to leave the onions to get cold. In the meantime, let's start with the beef. Best quality mince, lean mince preferably. Then to that mince, we add some tomato pesto. Now pesto or tomato always gives a wonderful flavor and additional savory taste to anything. Oh, Janet, won't you pass me a peg, please? You know, it's so convenient to be able to squeeze these packs. But don't despair what to do with it now. When you put it back in the fridge, just take a peg and put it in the fridge. So we've got the tomato in. Now we put a whole egg in there and beat the egg a little bit to make it easier to mix it in. Then the breadcrumbs go in. Breadcrumbs also give lovely texture to a meatloaf. And, oh yes, I nearly forgot. Let me just mix this in a little bit. Very important ingredient. Oh, this lovely onion beef stock mixture. Just look at that. Now, if you want to go over the top, you know how everybody loves a hamburger with cheese. Then you can put a bit of cheese in the meatloaf. But the trick is not to put the cheese cold or at room temperature. You put it frozen. We've left this cheese on a plate in the freezer, and you can see it's sort of crispy and frozen. And it stays whole when you mix it in. And this texture spreads right throughout the whole meatloaf. Now another very important trick when you're making fricadelles, this recipe up to this stage is superb to use for fricadelles, is to not overmix it. Towards the end, you can mix it with your hand a little bit, but you can see I'm using a very light movement, and I'm turning the bowl using all my fingers to mix the meat. We can just use the same plate that we've had the cheese on. It's nice and cold. We put this meat mixture on there, and then just use your hands. And of course, we all know that meatloaf cold the next day is wonderful on a sandwich, or fried with an egg for breakfast. There you are. That's just about right. And what we do now is I'm going to use a nice big lifter. You know, this is actually something they use in plastering houses. The tradesmen use it. Thanks, Janet. And then we lift this baby onto the foil. There you are, sweetheart. That looks great. And then to give it that extra gloss and flavour at the top, we drizzle some barbecue marinade over it. And you can either spread it with a brush, which is more difficult to wash, or otherwise use the back of a spoon. Now you understand that we're going to get some drip through to the bottom. And that is why at the bottom we're going to cook some beautiful potatoes. So when the dish is cooked, you've got this perfect meatloaf and some wonderful potatoes below it. What we've done is just to cut the potatoes into long strips, wedges, like big chips. We put them into the pan. Don't have to peel them. Peels are good for you. And then we give them a generous seasoning of our potato spice. And some olive oil. I've also got some onions here. Janet just reminded. Also, you can cut them into quarters, or gives a beautiful flavour to the potatoes. On top of that, we put the meatloaf, and now all that goes into the oven. Well, here's our meatloaf, beautifully glazed and perfectly done. So we just lift the meatloaf off. And the potatoes, they're not quite done. They need a little more cooking. So we're going to put those back in the oven for another 10-15 minutes. But turn the oven temperature up high, because potatoes like an intense heat. So instead of 180 that we did for the meatloaf, we now turn it to 200 or 220, just to brown the potatoes. This meatloaf is definitely going to be better and juicier if we leave it to stand. So at this stage, you've got the foil. Just undo the foil and just wrap your loaf. Just leave it to stand in a nice warm place. In fact, it's a really good idea to take, there is a little breathing hole there, take a cloth and leave it to stand like that on the counter while you're waiting for the potatoes to be cooked, and then of course you can make the lovely salads. Well, here we are. Supper is ready. The meatloaf with the bits of onions, the potatoes, tomato salad. We've seasoned with some of the seasoned sea salt, touch of sugar, and we've dressed it with this lovely Greek vinaigrette. And then for the green salad, we've just taken some cos lettuce and cut them in lengthwise into quarters, so that it's a bit different from the usual collection of salad leaves. Then we've used our garlic dressing, and we've mixed it half and half with fresh cream to get this thick, creamy, lovely dressing, which we drizzle over the leaves. Well, bon appetit.